Hello, welcome everybody online. We have a few people here at the Mary Black Foundation today. We're in the conference center. It's a really nice facility if you get to join us. We will be having ed series here in person, and we will continue to do hybrid with the exception of our July offering, which will just be virtual only. So I'm Maggie Gainey. I'm the interim executive director of MHA Spartanburg, and I just want to welcome everybody and make a couple of quick announcements and then introduce our speaker for today. First of all, I just want to thank everybody who participated in our last event this past weekend, Be Kind to Your Mind. It was a huge success. We were very thrilled to have about 100 people come out. It was wonderful, and get to honor some very special people with the Bailey Award. And also a new award called the Youth Voice Award. And we're very excited to give out both of those and celebrate those people in our community, all the good work that they're doing to destigmatize mental illness. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we still are accepting donations to help continue our mission of providing education and awareness opportunities to decrease this stigma around mental illness. So please feel free to join our website and check it out, get information there, and you can also donate as well. We have our Ed series in July, which is, like I said, virtual only. It will be on defining the scope of sex therapy, a guide for when to refer out. Carrie Morris, who is an LMFT, will be doing that for us. And then in September, we have Healing the Mind, Body, and Soul, Discovering the Art of Managing Anxiety, especially when within the body. And that is Bria Whitehurst, and she's an LISW. And then in November, we have a brief topic. I'm not sure the exact title yet, but that will be Tony Sanders, who's also an LISW. And then our mental health symposium, this is our 9th year, which is hard to believe, but we're excited about that. And our 9th annual symposium is on October 11th at the Piedmont Club, and you'll be hearing more information about that and our speakers, etc. Check us out on the website. We also have a Facebook page, which is MHA Spartanburg, as well as Instagram now. So please do check us out and follow us, like us. That just gets our message out more, and we really appreciate everybody doing that. Today's speaker is Monique Bullock. She is an LMSW. She got her master's degree in social work at the University of South Carolina. She has 7+ years of experience in the field and has really developed a diverse skill set, understanding the complexities of mental health issues. She's worked in a variety of settings: community mental health, schools, and hospitals. Currently, she is a collaborative care clinician providing solution-focused treatment to adults and adolescents. She also, in her personal life, enjoys singing, spending time with her husband and her now 1-year-old son. So we just want to welcome Monique. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to be here and be able to talk to all of you about self-care and establishing boundaries. Okay, so my objective is to really help all of you provide a little bit of education, a little bit of what I know about boundary setting, and then also hopefully this will help empower you and maybe inspire you to start setting boundaries or start thinking about how to start setting boundaries for yourself in the workplace and also in your personal lives. So I wanted to start off with this quote. I don't know who it's from, but just giving yourself permission to be kind to yourself, because this is the main focus with setting boundaries. You're doing this for yourself. So being able to kind of open your mind to the idea of setting boundaries, because it can be really difficult, really difficult to do and figure out where to begin. So I just wanted to start off with this quote of just opening your mind to this and, just giving yourself some grace during this journey when we're going to be talking about boundaries. So what are boundaries? It's a form of self-care. You're able to communicate your needs and your limits and expectations with people. It's also about not just respecting your own boundaries, but other people's as well, because they may have boundaries that they establish as well with people. Um, and it's really about communicating, being able to know what it is that you want to set boundaries with, or there's so many different areas to set boundaries in. So figuring out exactly what you're wanting to do and being able to communicate that effectively is going to help you out a lot. So the types of boundaries, there's so many different ones. These are just a few. You have physical boundaries, so your personal space, emotional boundaries, your emotions, being able to identify how you're feeling, being able to check in with yourself. Mental boundaries, your thoughts and beliefs, how you feel, what are your opinions about certain subjects or situations. Then, of course, the time boundaries, being able to prioritize self-care, scheduling that in. Also, you think of work with time boundaries, being able to unplug after work, like once work is done, not still continuing to do work afterwards. Then also your relationships, making sure you're making time for family, making time for friends, and then, having that time to yourself, doing hobbies that you may like to do. So there's a lot of different boundaries that you can set in a lot of different areas. And then you also think of material boundaries, like what are your personal items, what your properties that you may have. So there's so many different types of boundaries. I think these are just a few. I'm sure there are a lot more than this. So why should we care about boundaries? Why are they important to us? It helps promote our mental health. We're able to work on self-care, maintaining our self-esteem, being able to really check in with ourselves and figure out what it is that we want to set boundaries with regarding our mental health. Is it maybe we need to not like certain family members, maybe we need to kind of back off from certain people, maybe create limits, also in the workplace as well. So there are so many different areas. It helps you to establish a routine for yourself. You're able to work on preventing burnout and exhaustion, especially when it comes to work, but also establishing a routine with yourself in general. Maybe when you get off, having a routine for yourself, like, okay, I may go to the gym, I may cook dinner, like just figuring out what it is that you're wanting to do and then trying to make those steps to be able to do that and make it a routine for yourself. And then, of course, the communication piece is big. You're able to learn to communicate effectively. When you're working on establishing boundaries, it helps you with being more assertive with individuals and with yourself as well. I love this quote by Hansma Khan. He's a very well-known speaker based in New York. He's done a couple of TED Talks where he talks about burnout and talking about like leadership in the workplace. So burnout is the symptom, stress is the source. I feel like when it comes to the workplace, burnout is a word that we hear very often. And it can be difficult, especially I would say after COVID 2020, and then the workplace kind of changed for a lot of us, and then getting back into like the new routines of work after or post COVID. So I wanted to look into burnout a little bit more because I know that's a popular thing, especially with the workplace. So I was able to do some research about burnout. I looked up some information from the American Psychological Association. They had an article back in 2023 talking about burnout and how much that affects workers in the workplace. So they came out with some really interesting numbers. 57% of people in the workplace have an increased risk of being absent from the workplace for at least 2 weeks or more due to illness. 180% have an increased risk of developing depressive disorders due to burnout in the workplace. 84% of people in the workplace have an increased risk of type 2 diabetes due to burnout. And then 40% have an increased risk of hypertension due to burnout in the workplace. So I think it's a very popular thing that people are dealing with, and then trying to figure out what steps you can do to try to prevent that. So I think definitely setting boundaries could help you with preventing burnout from happening in the workplace. And it is attainable, being able to decrease it. So some signs that you may be experiencing burnout, or having difficulties with setting boundaries. If you're having a difficulty saying no to others, I know that's a hard thing for a lot of people. We may feel nervous about saying no or worried about somebody else's reaction if I say no to something. Wanting to people please is a very common thing. Being responsible or feeling responsible for other people's emotions or actions can be something that a lot of us struggle with. We may be overcommitting, sacrificing our own personal needs, and that can create resentment a lot of the time when we're just saying yes to everything, even though we know we may need to take a break, give ourselves time to relax. But we're just so focused. We care about our jobs. We want to do our best. So trying to find that healthy balance sometimes can be difficult. And allowing others to disrespect personal space or boundaries is another thing that people deal with a lot, that can create a lot of tension. So let's talk about healthy boundaries and what are the steps we even need to take to start doing that. Because the thought of boundaries sometimes can be very overwhelming, figuring out like, where do I start? Like, how do I even start setting a boundary? That can be really difficult. So I came up with some questions that you can ask yourself, kind of a self-assessment, to figure out, okay, where should I even start? For example, like, what are my personal values? What are my needs? Thinking about like, how do you feel about certain things? What are things that are important to you? That could help you kind of figure out maybe what areas you may want to start setting boundaries. What situations or behaviors from others make me feel uncomfortable or disrespected? Maybe you can go back into your mind of different situations that have happened where you were like, okay, I'm not really sure, like, I don't like how I felt after this situation with this particular person, or this behavior made me feel uncomfortable. So kind of thinking back to different situations where you felt uncomfortable or you may have felt disrespected, that may give you kind of an inkling on, okay, maybe I should set a boundary here in this area. Am I clear about my own limits or boundaries? How often do I find myself compromising them? So it's really, I think these questions could really help you figure out like, what areas are you wanting to start setting boundaries? Thinking about like what your limits are, where would you even want to start setting boundaries? Um, Thinking about how you want to communicate those boundaries. Maybe you want to start off just making one boundary in one certain area just to start off. Because it can become overwhelming if you're like, okay, well, I want to set boundaries in all of these areas, and let me start doing that today, like right now. So maybe giving yourself some time to kind of think through, okay, out of all of the things where I want to set boundaries, maybe there's one area I might want to start and then go from there. And these are some more questions that maybe you could ask yourself. Are there any areas in my life where I need to establish clearer or stronger boundaries? Um, Thinking about different reoccurring patterns in relationships where you felt violated. How do I react when someone crosses my boundaries? Am I able to enforce consequences based on the boundaries that you set? And then also, when you're setting boundaries, sometimes you do need to reassess those boundaries. You may have to adjust them depending on different situations, depending on how you are. As you grow, boundaries may change as well. So giving yourself time to adjust those boundaries as you go is important as well. So some examples of setting healthy boundaries. So say, for example, you have established a healthy boundary, like, okay, once I'm finished work at 5 p.m., I will not do any more work. Like, I'm done. So that could be a boundary that you want to set with yourself. So what would that look like exactly? So does that mean you're not taking anything home with you if you are working from home, or if you're working in a building, working in person? You're not going to take anything from work home with you. Does that look like, okay, I'm just going to make sure I lock up everything and then I'm just going to go? Do you need to start, like, okay, maybe around 4:45, I could start, turning off my laptop, putting my stuff away, just so you're not like, okay, it's 5 and now I'm still kind of here. So trying to think about little steps that you need to take to start setting those boundaries, because you want to be detailed in how you want to set them, so you're able to effectively communicate to people what boundary you're trying to set. Because people are not mind readers. So if you're unable to let them know exactly what the boundary is, they may not be able to follow through on it. So I can take on more projects right now. I can't take on more projects. So really checking in with what you're doing, like in the workplace, if you feel like your load is already full, maybe if you were to have a conversation with your supervisor, for example, kind of letting them know, okay, I think I may start to feel overwhelmed if I continue to take on more projects, and I'm still doing all of these projects that I'm doing right now. So being able to kind of effectively communicate how you're feeling. So being able to check in with yourself, to see how you're feeling, and then being able to communicate that to people is a very beneficial with establishing healthy boundaries. And here are some more examples on setting healthy boundaries, like in the workplace, setting limits on your workload. Also, communication, office hours, of course, unplugging on your time, like once it's 5 p.m. or what have you, what time you get off, unplugging from work. Relationships, establishing expectations of respect, communication, thinking about personal space, social events. Maybe you don't want to necessarily go to the concert this weekend. Maybe you want to relax and spend time with yourself or your family. So being able to recognize that you're feeling this way, and then being able to, effectively communicate, no, not this time, maybe next time. When there's another event, I may want to participate next time. And then social media is a big thing. So being able to manage screen time. I know sometimes, like on the iPhone, you can kind of establish how long you want to be on social media before it automatically cuts off for you. So being able to set boundaries for social media time, or establishing privacy settings on your phone or laptop could be helpful if you're trying to set limits on how often you manage those things. And boundary violations. So what happens when you set a boundary and you feel like, okay, I feel like I've communicated this boundary very well, but then the other person violates that boundary. So how do you work through that? Because that does happen. Being able to identify what the violation is. So going back to the self-assessment when you're trying to establish the boundaries, also thinking about, how could that boundary be violated? How would I know? Like, how would I want to react to that? What would be a consequence of violating that boundary? Because you definitely want to communicate right away once that boundary is crossed. Because if you don't say anything, that may allow the other person to be like, okay, well, I was able to get away with it. So maybe they're not really wanting to set that boundary and they may continue to violate that boundary. So being able to identify what the violation is, going back to setting the boundary in the beginning, you're thinking about what the boundary is, and then also thinking about, okay, well, how could this be violated? If I'm trying to explain what this is and then it's violated, what would that look like? And then being able to calmly and assertively communicate, that I established this boundary with you and I see that it's been violated, and then coming up with what that consequence is. Maybe it's, for example, if you are, say you want people to not wear their shoes in the house on the carpet when they come inside. And then someone, they're still walking on the carpet with the sneakers or the shoes on. And you're like, okay, well, I established this boundary where I don't want anyone to have their shoes on when they come into the house. And since you don't respect my space, maybe you shouldn't be able to come to the house during certain events or what have you. So thinking about what the violation and consequence will look like, and then reevaluating the relationship and situation if necessary. Again, being open to the idea that you may have to readjust the boundary depending on the relationship with this other person or the situation that you're dealing with. And so with setting boundaries, a big thing that people tend to struggle with is dealing with guilt with establishing boundaries. Some people feel like they're being selfish by trying to establish boundaries. So trying to reframe your thinking in that way, because setting boundaries is really for yourself. It's being able to make sure that you have a peace of mind, that you're able to go through life with limits and expectations. So trying to reframe how you feel about boundaries, because it's not being selfish to make sure that your well-being is being taken care of. So by validating your feelings, it's okay to have that feeling of guilt. That's a normal reaction that people have to setting boundaries. So being open and accepting how you're feeling during this journey, because it is difficult. It can be really hard, especially for people that don't set any boundaries or have never done it before. It can seem scary and uncomfortable to communicate how you're feeling. So being open to how you're feeling can be very helpful and beneficial for you. Also being able to clarify your boundaries. Sometimes you do have to remind people what your boundary is. Sometimes it takes a few times of, okay, this is what my boundary is. This is what my boundary is. Like repeating it to yourself and to others can be helpful as well. And practicing self-compassion, like I mentioned in the beginning, understanding that sometimes you won't get it right. Sometimes you may struggle with it, with setting boundaries, and that's okay. That's how we get better. We have to start from somewhere, start where you are. And then as you're going, you may make some mishaps as you're going, but continue to give yourself grace as you're figuring out what boundaries you want to set. And then setting realistic expectations. So as I mentioned in the beginning, maybe you want to start small with setting boundaries. You don't want to create 10 boundaries all at one time. Maybe you just want to focus on one thing in particular, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself as well as you're figuring out what boundaries you do want to set. So, just starting off small, maybe the way to start at first, just so you're getting, especially if you're new to this, just getting your feet wet with this will be helpful and help you through this whole journey. And then seeking support. Then you may have a friend that's really great with setting boundaries, maybe seeking support from them, figuring out how they work through setting boundaries with people could be helpful. And then of course, celebrate when you do really well and you feel like, okay, I started this, I think I got this a little bit. So being able to celebrate when you actually successfully established a boundary is great. Just boosting yourself, and then continue to practice self-care, just making sure that you're giving yourself grace during this journey, because it's a lot to start establishing boundaries. Um, so I think using some of these things will be very helpful with establishing boundaries. And I have a little video, hopefully it will go through. It's a little, uh-oh. Oh, okay.
Is that the video?
Yes. It's just a short little 2-minute.
If you aren't able to do it on there, you can scoot over a little bit and make it.
Okay.
I see it on that screen.
Okay, it's still loading over here.
Oh, some kind of virtual background.
Okay.
Yeah. Whoops. Why is the mouse not? I don't know why I'm not. There it is. Apologize online. We're having some technical difficulties here. Should be able to get it up soon. Where'd it go? We've got this laptop, and that's what she's. Okay, there, that should be, because they're, you're still sharing your screen, so that should work.
Okay.
You tell me when you want me to play this one.
Okay.
Today we're talking
You can start playing it.
about personal boundaries, the invisible lines that define the edges of who we are. Personal boundaries help us navigate in the world, knowing and managing where we end and the other person begins is essential to living a satisfying and healthy life. But when our boundaries are crossed, it can make us feel stressed, confused, and anxious. And as with most things to do with our brains, boundaries aren't one size fits all. We each set our own boundaries to allow some people to come close or to keep others at a distance. People can violate your boundaries in a number of ways. When someone does this, it's a big red flag. For example, if someone makes you feel like you don't have the right to your own individual thoughts and feelings, big red flag. Have you ever been told that you're responsible for someone else's bad behavior, violence, or abuse? A huge red flag. Or if someone always expects you to return texts or calls immediately, that's another red flag. Manage our own boundaries is a necessary step in learning to love ourselves and others. When you set a boundary and the people in your life respect it, that's a huge sign that this is the type of person you want in your life. Like when someone asks your permission, it doesn't force you into an uncomfortable situation, or when someone allows you to disagree with them without retaliation, or when you're allowed to say no to anything, including sex, drugs, parties, even requests for your time. When you're able to identify red and green flags, it allows you to strategically share your life with those around you. By strategic sharing, we mean that in every situation, you decide who has access to your body, mind, and personal information. With time and practice, you'll get better at being able to identify the red and green flags that define your personal boundaries. Through that process, you'll gain more trust in yourself and will be able to strategically share more of your life with the people around you that you know you can trust.
The red and green flags that define your personal boundaries.
Christians, did you know there's a biblical solution to getting rid of?
And will be able to strategically share more of your life with the people around you that you know you can trust.
Here's a fact of life. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what you look like.
You're fine. It's okay. So that was
Practice that part.
so that was a short little video about establishing boundaries to kind of conclude everything that I was talking about. And so this quote by Brene Brown, who is a very popular speaker, she talks about being vulnerable, dealing with shame and guilt. She has an awesome book called Daring Greatly that I've read. That was awesome. I love this quote by her. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. So I thought that quote was just great because it is about having courage because it is difficult. It can be very hard to establish boundaries. And it is, at the end of the day, about loving ourselves and being able to create those limits and expectations for ourselves and for others. So I just love Brene Brown, and I love that quote by her. So I also have some resources here. There are some awesome books that I was able to look up and find the Amazon links to, just in case you're interested. Nedra Tawwab, she has a wonderful book about establishing boundaries to find peace. That's an awesome book that I read. She also has a workbook that goes along with her book that she wrote. So there are different exercises that you can do in her workbook to help with establishing boundaries and trying to figure out where you want to start with that. There's another book by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend called Boundaries Workbook, and that's really awesome. It says when to say yes, how to say no, and to take control of your life. So those are some awesome resources if you're interested in learning more about setting boundaries and establishing boundaries.
Those that are online, you want to let them know that they should, in their post email from Zoom, should have the link to your slides, but if they don't, just email info@MHA-Spartanburg and I'll send them to you.
Okay, so everybody that's online, hopefully you should be able to look at all of the slides today and be able to click on the different links. If you're unable to, for whatever reason, you're unable to see the slides and be able to click on them, you can just email at MHA, info at MHA Spartanburg.org, and you will be able to receive those slides. So thank you so much for having me. Like, are there any questions or comments about anything at all?
Let's see. I got one question. Oh, Jessica. Oh, okay. Thanks, Jessica. Okay, let's see. And then let's see. in the chat. There's anything? No? No question. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A online. Do we have any questions here from Monique? Oh, there is one. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. We just got to thank you for sharing this, especially it is a much needed resource during Mental Health Month. Thank you for saying that. Self-compassion, self-care, so important. And this is timely that we're talking about this during Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you so much, Monique.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, if there are any other questions, feel free to email MHA. It's info@mhaspartanburg.org, or online you can see Monique's email address there. So feel free to send her questions. Oh, we've got another question. Oh, just another thank you.
Thank you.
It was a great presentation. Thank you. All right. Did that take care of that? Yeah. No open questions. All right. If that's all, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and sign off today a little early, but please let us know if you need any further information. And we will hopefully see many of you online for our July virtual Ed series. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. There we go.